Okay, thank you. Good morning. I'd like to call the regular meeting of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority Operations Committee to order, and the time is 10:10. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan Mahoney, the fire chief for Ross Valley Fire Department, and I'm honored for this year to serve as the committee chair. So thank you. Item number two, roll call.
Certainly for the town of Bolinas, do we have Chief Krakauer?
Here.
For Mill Valley, Todd Cusimano?
Here.
For San Rafael, John Stefanski or Calvin Schrader? For the city of Larkspur, do we have Dan Schwartz? Apologies. Do we have Chief Abe Roman for the city of San Rafael? No. Okay. Thank you, Dan. For the county of Marin, do we have Chief Marcucci? For Inverness, David Briggs?
Here.
For Kent,
I'll represent
Oh,
County.
apologies. Thank you, sir. We have Graham Groneman for the County of Marin for the purpose of the minutes. For Camp Wildfire, do we have Chief Pomey?
Here.
For Marin Wood, we have Eric Drakeson.
Here.
For Muir Beach, Chief Gove.
Present.
And we do have Chief Gove in the online environment. For Nevada Fire, do we have Chief Peters?
Here.
For Sleepy Hollow, do we have Chief Mahoney?
Here.
For Southern Marin, do we have Chief Tubbs or Chief Hilliard?
Chief Barnes in place of Chief Tubbs.
Thank you, Chief. For Stinson Beach, Chief Perry.
Here.
For the town of Corte Madera, Chief Martin.
Here.
For the town of Fairfax, do we have Heather Abrams?
Here.
For the town of Ross, do we have Krista Johnson?
Yes.
And for the town of San Anselmo, do we have Dave Donnery?
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum, sir, and we may proceed.
Thank you. Item number three is agenda adjustments. Do any committee members or staff have any adjustments to the agenda? Okay, hearing none, we'll go on to item number four, open time for public expression. The public is welcome to address the Operations Committee at this time on matters not on the agenda that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. Please be advised that pursuant to Government Code Section 54954.2, the committee is not permitted to discuss or take action on any matter not on the agenda. Comments may be no longer than 2 minutes and should be respectful to the community. Please silence your cell phones during the meeting. Mute your microphone when not speaking. Martina, is there anybody online who would like to make a comment?
And I see no reactions at this time.
Is there anybody in person?
And there are no in-person comments from the room.
Seeing none, we'll close public comment and we will move on to item number four, Planning and Program Managers Report. Ann Krelock will provide a report out.
Great. Thank you so much. One slide today for me, since we have a lot of content to get through. We have a lot going on. I want to make sure folks are aware of a couple of public events coming up. We have a field trip coming up to showcase Fire Smart gardening in Novato. So we'll be heading to Novato Fire's headquarters at 95 Roland Way on March 27th. So join us there. Let me know if you'd like to join, but RSVPs are not required. We're also planning a public meeting for our CWPP update, and we have chosen a date. So that is May 2nd, Wildfire Preparedness Day. In the morning, we haven't chosen a start time yet. It will likely be 9:30 or possibly 10 a.m. That'll be at the Embassy Suites. And so we're looking forward to that event and hope to see many of you there. More information on that coming soon. And then other events that are more internal, we've got a broom workshop coming up. We've been working with member agencies and land management agencies and all of that staff to think through how we tackle broom in French broom, Scotch broom, Spanish broom, that invasive non-native shrub that tends to fill up our understories in our landscapes here. How do we tackle that in a more efficient way? So really trying to learn from each other, what's working, what's not working, et cetera. So we'll be partnering, actually Marin Water is going to be hosting us for that workshop. So we're really looking forward to that. We're also holding a series of GIS trainings for member agency staff. Our GIS contractor, part of their scope of work is training of staff. So we thought we'd extend that out to member agencies. We've got an event planned and several people signed up to join us. We'll be recording that and distributing that to any folks, any staff who can't make it. So we're looking forward to diving into that. We're also hosting a group called the Resources Legacy Fund. This is a nonprofit organization who works on policy and funding for efforts related to environmental efforts, natural resources, climate change, et cetera. And they really like what we're doing and they wanted to come and visit us. So we're going to be hosting them on the 24th, their whole board actually, for much of that day. So we're really excited to host them. We're also, several of us are going to the WUI conference. We'll invite Mark to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and thank you to the Marin County Fire Chiefs for a nomination through the National Association of State Foresters, the National Association of Fire Chiefs, U.S. Forest Service, and the National Fire Protection Association have an annual wildfire mitigation award. The fire chiefs nominated Marin Wildfire, and we're one of about 3 or 4 agencies nationwide that are being recognized at that award, and it'll be presented on March 25th at 1:30 at the WUI conference. So President Hilliard, who's our board of director from Southern Marin Fire, and I will be there to accept the award. And thank you for the Marin County Fire Chiefs and for Dan for taking the lead on the application.
Yeah, exciting stuff. So I wanted to highlight just a few of the things that Marin Wildfire staff have been working on, along with and our consultants in many cases. We do a lot of work on right to enter agreements with residents and also land management agencies. We put together packages with all of the consultants and contractors who'll be working with all of their insurance information. That's a big push right now to make sure that we can get out on the landscape to do surveys and get the crews out there. For example, the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Field Break covers about 2,000 parcels. So it's a lot of knocking on doors, walking, having conversations, a lot of good opportunity for one-on-one conversations. Some work on the ground that's just finishing up. We've been working in Muir Beach a lot, and I see Chris Gove on the call here. That is that some of the work includes work along Highway 1 on federal land. So we've been partnering with national parks to get that work done right adjacent to the road. And a lot of that is non-native shrub removal of heather and retreatment of areas that we treated a few years ago. So it's been a great partnership with national parks, been a lot of coordination with Caltrans, and that will be finishing up likely next week. We have some hazardous tree removal going on the Terwilliger property in Muir Beach. Those trees were leaning and actually quite a bit more hazardous than we thought they were, even just starting the project. So that's been a great partnership, and a lot of folks are very relieved to see those trees be removed. That'll be finishing up here probably this week, I believe. We've also been working with a lot of folks in San Rafael, Novato, and the Central Marin agencies on topics related to grazing. So, for example, some of us were attending San Anselmo's public meetings to talk about grazing and the benefits and the need for it and how to do it well. So more to come on that. I believe there will be a proposal in this next work plan for additional grazing in Central Marin, so that's exciting. And a big push right now to get all the contracts in place for this next season of work. So you'll see a lot of task orders under existing contracts because we have our master services agreements for vegetation management and other contracts moving forward. So a big push there. A lot of work in the regulatory environment. We're meeting still regularly with the Coastal Commission to coordinate work in the coastal zone. We're meeting regularly with the tribe. We've been meeting regularly with the tribe for 5 years, but a lot of coordination in the coastal zone right now. We meet with the water board quite regularly. We send them data quarterly on many of our projects, so a lot of coordination there. and a lot of continued support for environmental compliance going on behind the scenes. Botanical surveys, bird surveys, geological surveys, cultural resources surveys, things like that, permits. And then our other programs are very busy right now, distributing grant dollars to residents for certain home hardening and defensible space activities. The Zone Zero program is being built. We've got 3 pilot areas that are in the works for Zone Zero related activities. Kathleen and Joe will talk about that a little bit later. The Chipper program is well underway and plans are in progress for this next season. Stephen Peters will give us a bit of an update on that and how well signups are going. Signups have been open for 4 days and are roaring, so a lot of demand. The GIS program, we're collecting data, we're updating the models, and we're updating the dashboards online. And I'm going to show you guys what that looks like in a sec. We're also building a data hub so that those dashboards and data that we might want to share with partners, with the public, will have a great landing space, a good structure for GIS big data online. So that's in progress. And of course, we're working on our CWPP update. And draft documents are with all of your member agencies for review right now internally, and then we'll be going out to the public in May. And then we've got our fiscal year 24-25 annual report now online and ready for viewing for anyone who wants to take a look at that. I'm going to share my screen to show you where to find all the dashboards, if I can find the right window. Come on. Yeah, it's not giving me the option. All right. Well, I'm going to let Mark take that on. This is the risk to switching from your old trusty laptop to a new laptop, a new, more advanced laptop. Do you want to run it or do you want me to?
I'll do what you tell me to do.
Okay. So I want to make sure everyone knows from the homepage where to find the progress dashboards. So Mark's going to navigate us to the second item under About MWPA, Goals and Progress Dashboards. And we've got some dashboards there to take a look at. The first one is related to vegetation management. And you just say click here. Oh, thank you. And this dashboard is updated quarterly. And so you can see where vegetation management is taking place on the landscape. This is public, and it gives you statistics in terms of how much we're reducing risk. And those statistics change based on what's in your view. So when you zoom in, those statistics are updated based on what is visible in that viewer. So encourage all of you guys to check that out and explore. And then if we go to the next one, the Goal 2 dashboard is brand new, up and running. And so all of these dashboards are updated regularly. And we're going to be continuing to work on making these dashboards user-friendly, using language that's understandable to the public, but also providing opportunities for member agencies and others who are interested to dive deeper into the data and the information there. So I just want to make sure everyone has this view. Mark, do you want to say anything about this one? Okay. All right, let's just show where to find the next dashboard. Great. So Goal 5 is the third dashboard that's up and running here. And this shows not only MDSA data, but also Nevada and San Rafael. So defensible space and home hardening, and you can dive into all these statistics as well. So these are great sources of information for you to reference as you're talking about this work in public meetings, etc. It's updated regularly. This is updated almost in real time, right? And so it's a very real-time good tool for you all to to reference as needed. And please do reach out if you want more of a tour or more information about any of this. So I just wanted to make sure everyone knows where to find them, and we can dig into all of that, one-on-one. If you want to dive in and learn more about any of these dashboards, please do reach out. And that's the end of my report. Thanks for bringing the tour guide, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Ann. Are there any questions from committee members? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment. Is there any public comment either in person or on Zoom?
There are no hands at this time, sir.
Thank you. We'll bring it back to the committee. Any discussion needed? There's no action at this on this item. It's just for discussion only and receive report. Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to item number 6, the consent agenda. The consent agenda is can be approved with one motion. Are there any committee members that would like to pull anything from the consent agenda? All right, I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment. Is there anybody online or in person who would like to comment on the consent agenda?
There are no hands at this time.
Okay, I have a motion to vote approval in consent agenda.
Well, second.
Second from Chief Martin. Martina, can you do roll call?
Of course, sir. And so it looks like we have a motion by Dan Schwartz of Larkspur with a second by Chief Martin from Central Marin Fire. In order of member agencies, can we get a vote for Bolinas,
Yes.
Mill Valley,
Yes.
Santa Fe,
Yes.
Larkspur,
Yes.
County of Marin,
Yes.
Inverness,
Yes.
Enfield,
Yes.
Marinwood,
Yes.
Muir Beach,
Yes.
Novato,
Yes.
Sleepy Hollow,
Yes.
Southern Marin,
Yes.
Stinson Beach,
Yes.
Puerto Madera,
Yes.
Fairfax,
Yes.
Ross,
Yes.
San Anselmo.
Yes.
That is full representation for the Operations Committee. Motion passes with unanimous vote.
Okay, moving on to item number 7. These are our discussion items. 7A is Planning and Program Manager Ann Krelock will provide a staff report on the work plan development update and schedule.
Great, thank you so much. For those in the public who aren't familiar with this process, each year, Marin Wildfire agencies go through the process of thinking through how to spend taxpayer dollars next fiscal year, so starting July 1. We start the process in December, and then we continue meeting generally through early to mid-May. And then our board makes a decision in mid-May on the work plan and budget for the next fiscal year. The operations committee makes final decisions around what proposals should be included in the work plan, what projects and programs. We also have a working group called the Advisory Technical Committee that's staff level that provides the proposals themselves. They input those proposals into our online kind of portal. And then we have a lot of discussions around where those priorities are and if that fits into the operations committee's overall guidance. The ops committee then makes a final decision in May and a recommendation to the board. The board will consider the work plan in May. I'll be asking the ops committee to help present this information to the board twice in April and May to give the board more time to kind of think through all the different proposals, more back and forth, more discussion time. So that's one change from previous years. Right now, we're in terms of process, the operations committee today will be hearing summaries of the JPA-wide proposals. Those are the proposals that affect all of the JPA. So all of our 5 geographic zones, like public education, the GIS program, the operations budget for the MWPA, et cetera. And then we dive more into the zone-specific zones, so or proposals. So the proposals that are really projects that, say, San Rafael Fire wants to do within its jurisdiction, and that comes next. So we'll be reviewing those proposals at the next meeting. So the Operations Committee, this is the schedule that we see regularly. I show this slide a lot. The check marks are things that we've completed. So now we're in March, the Operations Committee meeting here, and we're diving into the JPA-wide proposals. We also have an ad hoc subcommittee that will meet to dive into more detail about the things that we discussed today, and then we'll report back out from that ad hoc subcommittee to this group. ATC will continue meeting. ATC has more to discuss in terms of the JPA-wide proposals, and we haven't discussed the zone-specific or agency-specific proposals yet. So this is where we are, and we also one of the things that the Operations Committee has already done, and thank you all to those who contributed, is reviewing and updating our strategic guidance. And this was delivered to the ATC at the last meeting. So they have your guidance. None of it has changed. None of the guidance measures on this slide have changed. We're still going with house out, home hardening and defensible space, shaded fuel breaks, prescribed fire, evacuations, insurance, public education, except for this. This is new. This was added by the Operations Committee, I believe, at our last meeting. And that was reduction of ignition potentials through local projects and programs, including but not limited to enforcement. So this is new guidance, and that was delivered to the ATC this time. So I want to go over kind of the general budget as it stands right now. We did just learn in the last few hours that we have a CPI now at 2.5%. So what we do is we guess, maybe a conservative guess of what we think the CPI might be. We run the numbers and kind of come up with ballpark, and that's kind of where we start. So all of these numbers will be updated now that we have the CPI. We use February to February consumer price index data, and that doesn't come out until basically today. So it is quite limiting in terms of when we can know exactly what our budget is. So these numbers are preliminary. We will update them and we will provide them to everyone so that we can finalize our budget. So if you take a look at this, assuming a 2% CPI, so this number is going to be a little low, we come in at a total projected revenue for next fiscal year at $23,437,461, and there are probably some pennies in there too. That's our starting point. From there, we do a lot of math and spreadsheets, calculate 60% for core, that's at 14 million. 10% of that 60% is the administrative budget for the Marin Wildfire. So that comes in at 1.4. We take that out of the core 60%, just do some math, and you get 12.6 million. Then we need to come up with that JPA-wide project number, and this is just draft right now. This is the version that I have in the slides now. This will likely change based on input from the ATC and all of you. But right now, it's about the same as it was last year at 5.79 million for JPA-wide projects and programs. Then the remaining core budget is 6.86 million, and that's where we divvy it up according to percentage for the different zones. So that's how those numbers, the 60% of core numbers, are generated in that next section of the spreadsheet. And then core does not affect DSpace and local. That's just straight 20% of the revenue. So DSpace and local each are at 4.57-ish. So that's where we are at the broad, high level look at the budget. Is there anything you want to add to that, Mark? Okay. And then if you further dive into local and DSpace dollars and core, according to this version of the draft, this is where we are. So you can see, you know, for example, Bolinas is at 28,000, Inverness is at 24,000 for local and DSpace budget, whereas Novato Fire is at 1.1 million, Santa Fe also 1.1 million. So this is how it breaks down currently. And these numbers will change now that we have the CPI. And then I will leave it there. We're going to dive into the JPA-wide proposals as item 7B. So happy to take a moment, hit pause, and take any questions. We can have a discussion about this if you'd like.
And I had a question on the last slide that you had up there.
Sure.
As it the budget compared the comparison from the previous years.
Oh, the JPA-wide?
Yeah.
Oh, we can, let's discuss that in 7B. Is that okay? Okay. Do you want me to start 7B or do you want to? We don't need to make any decisions today. We don't have to take any votes on these items. It's just
Okay.
discussion.
Well, I'll open it up to the committee if the committee has any questions. I'll bring it back to public comment. Any public comment? Anybody in person or online?
And sir, there are no hands at this time.
All right. Seeing no public comment, we'll bring it back to the committee for any discussion. As mentioned, there's no action required here. It's information only. Okay. Seeing no discussion from any committee members, we'll go ahead and move forward with item 7B, which is the draft authority-wide proposals. And Anne?
Great. Thank you. So what we're going to do today is just at a high level run through each of the proposals that are current. This table is meant to be really comprehensive, so it includes past proposals that are no longer moving forward, such as the ordinance update support, the countywide fire road inventory and assessment, that those dollars have already been distributed and that's underway. The wildfire risk perception survey that's already done, and so we don't need to address that. Same with regional wildfire disaster preparedness coordinator or coordination. That's not moving forward in this budget. The Xyla plan item we will be discussing. That's optional, and I think it's worth kind of discussing to what extent to include that in either this or future work plans. And then Zone Zero in a Box, that's not asking for additional dollars, but it's a current program that can coordinate with the other programs. So we'll hear about that today. So the idea here is to show how the JPA-wide has changed over time and what proposals were funded previously and at what levels. And then we're going to go through each of these items one by one today, and various folks are going to help me present that information. So, and all of this is in your packet that was attached to the agenda. So if that sounds good, I'm going to move on to the first item, and Mark is going to talk about this one.
Most of this is pretty basic stuff. Our rent for the space here at 335 and next door at 345. Any tenant improvements that we may do, maintenance of our website, continued communications training, research and development, which we're proposing zero because we did not use any of the research and development funding from last year, so we can just roll that over. And then our ongoing insurance. And I think the next one's mine too. So one of the things that's going to be an interesting conversation that's worth discussing is our Genesis and Ladder subscription expires almost a year from now. So the end of February of 2027. And we've already paid for that subscription. So the question will be, does the Marin Fire Service want to continue with Genesis as their evacuation management platform? And does the Marin Fire Service and law enforcement wish to continue with the Ladris AI subscription? So if that's the desire to continue those subscriptions, then we probably should keep some type of placeholder here for that funding. Or if there is a desire to pull away from those subscriptions, then we can zero out that or drop it down. The safe way to handle this would probably be to hold some type of funding in there in case we do decide to continue with the subscriptions. But if we choose not to, then we can push those back to the zones relative to their zone percentages. Be happy to pause for any conversations you guys or thoughts you may have.
Quick question on that, can I? Yeah, has there been discussion that we're unhappy with that subscription? I mean, I thought this was going to be kind of the centerpiece technology-wise for evacuations moving forward. So it's kind of the first I've heard of it.
So when we first went into Genesis, or it was Zone Haven earlier, it was new and emerging technology that was hard for people to emulate on their own. GIS capabilities within Esri, within member agencies has increased that perhaps if the fire chiefs and the police chiefs are supportive of this, that Marin OEM would actually be able to manage their own evacuation management platform on a GIS basis. Sonoma County, as an example, did that themselves. But OEM is not feeling comfortable making that decision on their own. They want to get the feedback from the fire chiefs and the police chiefs before they make that decision.
Okay, that makes sense. And is that going on right now?
Now's the time to start it. And so we have a year with that subscription. And I'd hate to zero it out and then come back to try to recover. But I just want to be able to plant that seed that those conversations are happening and it could be refunded back to the zones relative to the zone percentages.
May I make a couple comments?
Please.
So just from a Southern Marin perspective in our law enforcement partners, we support both Genesis and Lattice. I had a conversation with Lattice a few weeks ago and indicated that it might not be being utilized to its fullest extent, and that we would appreciate, some ongoing training and a couple pounds of pressure, throughout the year would be unreal. The Genesis product is California wide with some exception of like Sonoma and others. It's a product that the line firefighters and police officers are used to. It's integrated with our operational MDCs, our route of travel and emergency response toolkit that through our iPads. So from a Southern Marin's perspective, we support both.
We just need to be able to have some kind of support on there. I know we've had it for a while, but I don't think a lot of our agencies have been able to capture quite the technology and support to be able to use that to its full extent. So generally speaking, I think we're supportive of it, but we do need some internal support and to see what tools are available to us. I think that would make the decision a lot smoother.
We have definitely underutilized the capabilities of Lattice AI as a specific example, and we'll get a spike of interest. An agency will dig in and then just lose a little momentum just because it's a lot of work. And they get not distracted, but get pulled off of that project onto other projects because of lack of bandwidth within the organization. So I get what you're talking about.
David Briggs had his hand up.
And speaking on behalf of the Marin County Fire Chief, since I'm representing them at this point on there, I think we will bring this back as a discussion internally to see if we have general support on it, and then come back to you next month with a general recommendation of support or lack of support.
And we're in a position to follow your lead on this. This is really, that's how it generated. It was, we're here. The way the Measure C language is written is that we could provide this support, but it's an operational tool. So we feel the operational personnel should be making that decision. And we had David Briggs with his hand up. Do you still?
Yeah, I was just wondering what the cost was for the Ladris portion of that subscription.
If I remember the breakdown, it was a little under 100 for Genesis and a little over 100 for Ladris. Come with the 208.
Yeah, I'll echo the sentiment that the Ladris portion, I don't think has been particularly useful, at least for us. And I question, for the smaller agencies, if it's really useful at all. I won't speak for Stinson and Bolinas or Muir Beach, but for Inverness, you know, it's a lot of money, 100 grand, and we're pretty small. So
Go ahead. All right. The next one is that you'll see pop up on the slide is my item as well to discuss, and that is the fire aside subscription. Rather than have each of the member agencies that are doing inspections pay for the fireside defensible space subscription, we just felt it was easier to make it a JPA-wide proposal. We did that starting our second year of existence. And that also includes the dynamic risk assessment that goes on in the background. So the other way to do this, if you wanted to pull it out of JPA-wide, would be to have each of the member agencies pay their percentage out of their DSpace budget. But the decision was made back in year 2 of Marin Wildfire to do it out of the JPA wide. And I'm sure there's probably continued support for that process.
Great, thank you. So the next item is the GIS program, and Megan Leslie Torres with Green Info Network is here to present. Megan, are you there?
I am.
Great. Okay, you should be able to share your screen.
All right. All right. Hello, everyone. Anna already went over some of these things, but so I am Megan Leslie Torres from Green Info Network. Some GIS highlights for last year. We continue to streamline and standardize the process of collecting vegetation management treatment areas and evacuation route clearance treatments across the agencies. This evolved into creating ArcGIS online-based interactive map tools for each zone. The treatment data can be edited, updated using this tool. Additionally, the map contains other pertinent information such as the geologic surveys that are done, sensitive species, and other areas of avoidance. We created another interactive map where the user can input their address and see what Firewise community they're in and information about it. We developed a dashboard for goal 2, progress on detection, alert, and evacuation. In the detection tab, we display the percent of acres per zone visible from 2 cameras. For the alert tab, we display the number of parcels with at least 1 Alert Marin subscription. And in the evacuation tab, we show the percent by zone of fire resilient roadway miles when evacuating by car. Next fiscal year, we'll continue to grow the vegetation management database and work with member agencies on data collection. We'll create dashboards for the remaining goals and continue to update the existing dashboards when new data is produced and updated. We'll create an ArcGIS online hub site that will consolidate the multiple dashboards, story maps, interactive project maps, and other Esri-based products in one central location. We'll continue to support the Marin County Fire Road Inventory, and finally, to continue to support Marin Wildfire with overall GIS support and provide GIS trainings to the member agencies, starting in a couple weeks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So next up, we have the resident grant program. Josh and Kathleen will be talking about the resident grant program and also the Zone Zero program.
You'll see that?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, quick overview of the main proposed changes for the grant program this year. Well, I guess the first is actually keeping the budget the same as what we decided last year, that midpoint split, which you can see here on the right of the slide. And this is, again, a midpoint between the by revenue percentages from each zone and like an even 20% split across all zones. And we decided we needed a specific number that each zone was going to receive so that it didn't fluctuate based off of where demand was coming each year. And this is what we came up with. I think it worked really well. And so the proposal is to stick with that funding breakdown, but then to move the programs a little bit more closely integrated with the defensible space departments and the member agencies, provide a little bit more local control over the program so that we don't have just universal guidelines that, you know, somewhat meet the needs of the county as a whole, but can better meet the regional priorities of each member agency. Another benefit of that is that the D-Space departments are better able to leverage the grant program as a tool for action and education, meeting their goals. And so, yeah, to demonstrate this, you know, we've got non-combustible gates has been one of our really popular grant items this year, and so that might be more of a priority for one area than you know, this work that was done recently through the direct assistance program out in Inverness. Just very different places, very different risks, and the programs should be designed to reflect that. Oh, let me.
Mark, just when you start to clean this up and move forward, the numbers in the staff report don't match that slide. So you may want to fix that.
Okay, thank you. We'll take a look.
So Zone 0 in a box, it shall have a new name shortly. But for now, that's what we're calling, that's our working name. So what we're proposing here is kind of direct assistance really based toward or pointed towards the community. There will be no change to the dollar grant amount for any jurisdiction. It's really just an additional option that each individual jurisdiction can choose to use a portion of their direct assistance money. What it will do is we intend to fund risk reductions at the neighborhood and community wide scale. And we're doing this with the input from the individual fire departments. We don't go in there. You work with us to choose that neighborhood. And basically the idea is it's an efficient use of funds, and it will have exponential effects because we're targeting high risk neighborhoods to complete specified home hardening defensible space items that, again, we work in connection with the local fire agency. So again, it's an option that you can choose to use your direct assistance funds. It's not a substitute, no change in dollar amount.
Great.
And in response to that question regarding the budget, the 900,000 is the proposed budget for the program. The 875 there was like an estimated amount for the amounts that would actually be going towards grants or some form of assistance. So yeah, so just less admin cost.
Thanks, Josh. Okay. Let's see. Let's go ahead and invite Stephen Peters to speak to the CHIPPR program.
Excuse me, and
Yeah.
may I ask a quick question?
Yes.
Regarding the Zone 0 in a box, how does that, when you're identifying area neighborhoods to target, is that corresponding with the high fire severity zones in the new?
Correct. When we target a particular area for attention, it's with the fire departments, but basically you saw that map on there that was kind of going in and out. We're basically targeting high risk zones, high wildfire zones, firewise sites, places where we can really have the most effect.
So in regard to the zone, the process that all the towns and cities all just went through in this past year. So would that just be for high fire severity zones? And I mean, what exact categories?
Well, again, we're going to be working with the individual agencies on that. So it's really, it's going to be different from each of the zones for each of the agencies.
Okay.
I don't know if we're trying to keep it a real high level. I don't know if it's the time and the place to get more detailed, but we'll be using things like just areas that have high risk items on those sites. They're Firewise sites, so we can leverage their relationships, their HOAs possibly, high fire zones, WUI. We're planning to integrate some other things like, just having all the modeling that we use. We're going to integrate that into our approach too. When we bring it to the fire departments, and they will help us narrow into which neighborhoods they want to be targeting with these projects.
Okay, thank you.
Can we go back though? I know I'm a little confused about the prior item. Is there an administrative charge in the grant program?
It's for the subscription for the software to run it.
Okay, so can we have that in documents? Like that's not stated anywhere.
Yeah, we'll put that in.
And so it implies that all the money went in the grant program and some of it's not. So let's make that clear.
You got it.
Great, thank you so much. So we will add some detail to the proposal that's included in the packet and make sure to kind of itemize that item in the work plan proposal. All right, so next we'll hear from Stephen Peters on the Chipper Day.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This past season of the Chipper Day program was incredibly successful. In fact, it was the most successful season we've had in the history of the program. We picked up well over 18,000 cubic yards over just under 5,100 pickups during last season. And so because of that, we're looking to continue the same model that we've been using over the last season. 6 rounds over all 5 zones. With that, we're not asking for any budget increase. It'll be the same $1.4 million we requested last year. And we're really confident that we can have another successful season. In showing that, as I mentioned earlier, we opened preseason signups this past Monday. As of this morning, when I checked, we already have over 1,200 signups, which is far more than we had at this time last year. So we're confident that we can have another successful season.
Any questions for Stephen? All right. Next, we're going to jump into public education related topics, including the communications coordinator, the public education and outreach budget, and Ember Stomp. And Jean Bonander and Mark Brown will be presenting this item.
Hi, good morning. I'm reporting on the work that Pam Kuhn and I have been doing over the past few months to conduct a series of listening sessions with the member agencies and some of our partners. So between November and February, we held over 25 listening sessions and learned a lot about the 3 topic areas that MWPA asked us to investigate. First being that what were member agencies' internal communication structure looking like, and what could they share with us about how they communicated internally? Second was whether or not member agencies were interested in and or supportive of a communications coordinator and communications guidance committee based at MWPA. And third was any comments that member agencies had about the relationship between MWPA and Fire Safe Marin and how those services should be coordinated. So there was, as you might suspect, quite a bit of commentary was generated and a number of suggestions and recommendations. We have put those into a final report that was delivered to Mark yesterday, and that will be for his consideration and review and how he would like to have it further, the issues that were raised further addressed. In addition, we took a very interim report to the ATC last week and showed that information to them, basic information, and explained that we would be bringing it to the Ops Committee and to Mark in more detail. So just broadly, there were 3 key recommendations that we came up with. One was related to the communications coordinator, and our recommendation was to consider hiring a strategic communications coordinator at no additional cost increase to MWPA. Second was to utilize ad hoc communications, public education task forces over creating a new standing committee for communications guidance. And the third was to suggest transitioning the relationship between MWPA and FireSafe Marin to a contractual manual of services model. So it is my understanding that what will happen next is that after Mark has a chance to review the full report, that the Ops Committee, ad hoc committee of the Ops will take a look at the specific recommendations and make some suggestions going forward as to what should happen going forward. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
As Gene stated, the plan will be to, with the ops ad hoc that's been created, really dig deep into the findings and the recommendations and have that ops ad hoc report back out to the full operations committee.
Great, thank you.
Next item is public education, and we know that there's been quite a bit of conversation in better defining our relationship and the scope of work between Marin Wildfire and FireSafe Marin. That was part of the reason why we had Gene and Pam do that survey of all of our member agencies in alignment at the same time that we were building the scope of work. And we were able to find information, receive information during the survey to help guide the scope of work. And one of the things that was loud and clear during a survey was some of our outreach is probably, and our media push is probably starting to overwhelm the community. And perhaps we need to tone down and bring down the press buys that we have been doing. So when you see the scope of work, you're going to see a lot less of that media purchase that you've seen in the past. Also, consolidating resources. We don't have to reinvent the wheel over and over and over, that we can recycle a lot of the material that we've already had. And many of the concerns the operations committee had last year and in previous years, that the scope of work really was not defined in this is how much effort is going towards this type of work. So as we go through, I'm not going to go line by line, but as we go through this scope of work, you'll notice that it's been divided into programs. And when we ask for FireSafe Marin to cost the programs, we'll see how much effort is going towards each of the program. I think we'll meet one of the needs that we've seen. Plus, this is a much more well-defined scope of work than what we've had in our professional services agreement in previous iterations with FireSafe Marin. So the first program is the development coordination of new and existing Firewise communities. And that's in alignment with what the surveys pointed out was most of the people that were surveyed felt that our face-to-face communications with our community members is what is most successful, specifically in the Firewise communities. We're seeing a lot of success in the Firewise communities. So what we're looking to do in this task is strategically continue to grow and expand the Firewise communities, serve as a point contact and lead coordinating organization for the Firewise communities, promote the Wildfire Home Evaluation Program amongst the Firewise sites. And part of this is get people to open their reports, encourage people to walk with the inspectors. We find that people are 60% more likely to take action if they actually walk with their inspectors. Some of us, Novato has been great about having all of their detailed inspections are with the resident, and we see a lot of engagement. I know the DSA is going to be looking to change their model a little bit to have appointments so that they can start having more interaction with the residents. And so through our Firewise communities, this is how we could start to coordinate that. promote programs such as Chipper Days, encourage and support education, especially the three modes of home ignition, which are ember, direct flame contact, and radiant heat. And then one big gap we noticed was that a lot of the evacuation activities or other activities that Firewise communities were doing were not communicated up to OEM as an item for them to track, and vice versa. Things that were OEM was doing weren't getting translated back down to OEM or to the Firewise communities. And then I think this item number 3 is going to be huge for the Firewise communities. So much of the data that they need to apply for their renewal already exists in Fireside, but it's kind of hard to leverage that. So we want to work with Fireside to create an API that the data that's in Fireside will automatically translate into the application to the NFPA to continue their Firewise certification. And then continue our Spanish language risk assessment template. I'll let you read the rest of the items, but I think I hit the key points. And then we have actual deliverables listed, how this program contributes to our measures of success that have been approved by the board. And then when we move this forward, this is where FireSafe Marin will be able to say this is how much this aspect of the proposal will cost. Second one is to support residents' implementation of DSpace and home hardening. And again, maintain a state-of-the-art user-friendly website. And if you may not know that every single one of the findings on the DSpace reports, regardless of your jurisdiction, if there's a finding, the resident's able to click on that finding and it'll go to the FireSafe Marin website that talks about that specific finding and why it's important and what they can do to mitigate that finding. So we'll continue to keep that going. Develop and implement 2 countywide bilingual communication campaigns per year. These are some of the ways that they'll look to do that. And then respond to residents' questions in partnership with the local home evaluation programs and grant programs. A lot of times people are still struggling with name branding, whether it's FireSafe Marin that's doing the inspections, Marin Wildfire doing inspections, Nevada Fire doing inspections. It all gets convoluted. And a lot of times FireSafe Marin gets the first phone call. They'll help with what they can and then divert the caller to the appropriate member agency. The deliverables is continue to maintain the website, annual reporting of the number of emails, phone calls, and such that they receive. And those are the goals that they will be looking at and supporting. And again, they'll be able to cost out that particular program. Task 3 or Program 3, professional training and education programs for strategic partner organizations. A lot of that is specific to landscapers and contractors. And one of the things that we're partnering with Marin Community Foundation, Cal Poly San Luis, is the development of a contractor education program for home hardening, gutter guards, vents, non-wood returns to the fences, non-wood or non-combustible siding, whether it's just 6 inches or all of the siding. And so what we have been finding and working with our residents when they want to replace their fence, they can't find a contractor to do it. So we've been reaching out to Marin Builders Association and other groups to say, hey, you got a profit opportunity here. Let us help you take advantage of that. And now that provides resources for our residents to be able to take advantage of that. So we are also working in cooperation with UC Cooperative Extension for the landscape type training as people design zone 0 landscapes that are still aesthetically pleasing, because that's one of the biggest concerns of zone 0 is people think it's going to look barren and ugly. So this the tasks are listed here. What portions of our strategic measures are supported by that program, and then you'll see this will be where FireSafe Marin will be able to cost it out. And then community events, mostly through their ambassador program. They'll continue that. One comment from the ATC was that the numbers that are listed here are less than the numbers that are listed in the tasks. So a recommendation from the ATC was to evaluate if that number was too low. And then when we get down, we'll see what the deliverables are. And then it's kind of hard for these types of things to fall in within strategic measures. So that's why you see that kind of generic statement, but then the Fire Safe Marin will be able to cost out that specific item. And you'll notice on the proposal sheet that we've asked Fire Safe Marin to target $1 million for this. They may or may not be able to price this out at 1 million. And what I've asked them is if when you price it out, it comes out over 1 million, tell us what we're going to be missing if we stay at that $1 million. And that's going to be we're going to lean hard on you guys as the operations committee to say, this is what we want and this is what we don't want. Ember Stomp. We are still discussing about exactly when to do Ember Stomp, but we're starting to see a little bit of fatigue on agency's side about every 12 months doing Ember Stomp, and also wondering if May is always the best month to do Ember Stomp. So there is a suggestion to move Ember Stomp in the future years to September. Or wait, do I have it backwards? I have it backwards. We are in September, to move it back to May. Excuse me, sorry to misspeak. So instead of planning for September of 26, we're looking at planning for May of 27. It gives 18 months, a little bit of offload of effort from the member agencies. It puts us in Wildfire Preparedness Month for May. Still in the same fiscal year. We budgeted 150,000 last year. We spent 75,000 this year. In order to budget for 150,000 again for this fiscal year, we only need 75,000 as part of the proposal. The reason why we only spent 150,000 or 75,000 last year was because of donations and vendor submissions. We just can't guarantee that we're always going to have the donations. So we shot for 150, and if we come in less, we come in less.
Thank you. We could take a pause here and discuss further, or we could move on up to you all. Go ahead.
Thank you. In regards to the communications coordinator, is the vision for it to be a full-time employee of MWPA or a contract, or how does that work?
Depending on how the operations committee feels and supports, we feel that it would be, if it's supported, we feel it would be a full-time position. And we've started to draft out a position description that's pretty comprehensive. And we're wondering if we're asking for a unicorn, to be honest with you. But it would be a full-time position funded out of the JPA-wide budget.
So I have heard comments from 2 board members, not both from Ross, one from Ross, one from another agency, who are concerned about the optics of adding an employee when a renewal vote is forthcoming.
Yeah, I've considered that as well. All of our employees are at-will employees. We could easily, the last 2 that we hired, we actually hired to 2-year fixed terms. But I also am concerned about the organization stagnating. And that stagnation in of itself could keep us from being able to be productive. And that could hurt our renewal chances. So I get that it's potential that we wouldn't renew and we would have to say goodbye to any new employees. But I think if it's appropriate for us to grow, then perhaps we should. But it's not something that'll happen without your guys' support.
And Mark, just a quick question. The communications person, is that intended to be an internal communications person between the agencies that are involved in the NWPA for that communication link, rather than now going towards the actual public?
Yes, they would primarily consider, when it comes to our relationship between our member agencies, Marin Wildfire and Fire Safe Marin, the communications coordinator would be that hub of making sure that the communications are going well between Fire Safe Marin and all of the member agencies. So as a campaign is being built, it would be the communications coordinator's responsibility to make sure the member agencies are providing feedback and input into the development, not receiving it on the back end and saying, okay, here's the campaign. What do you think? It's going to be more like, this is the type of campaign we think we need to build. What do you think? Get their input. So yes, the communication coordinator would be focusing a lot on that. But when it comes to maintenance of Marin Wildfire's social media pushes and stuff like that, would fall on that person.
Okay, I'm a little bit concerned with that position, to be honest with you. Part of it because I think that the NWPA already has that responsibility now to ensure that's happening now within the all normal staff work that you guys already have in there. So I'm a little concerned that is a critical point that we're not addressing at this point, and we're addressing so many other issues that aren't issues right now, but that is a critical issue. As Jan said, that is a critical issue. So I do want to have more conversation around this, but I'm going to tell you right now that it is a hard pill to swallow, since in theory that is the core of what we do. That's JPA, that we maintain that communication on there. And for us to hire somebody to be able to communicate, to have that relationship with the rest of the agencies, is a little bit of a hard pill to swallow.
Well, and my response to that is I totally agree with you. It is our responsibility. And it's due to the rest of our staff being maxed out, it's been falling on me to be that coordination point. And I failed at that. Or I've not been able to put enough energy towards that. And that's why I feel like we need to have the position in order to put the right amount of energy towards that coordination.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How much, in regards to this communications position, how much is Fire Safe Marin currently doing on that front?
That's where they have been doing nearly 100% of our social media push. They have also been, for the most part, taking the point in helping to and trying to coordinate with our member agencies. But to be perfectly honest, I don't think all of the member agencies have treated them as that coordination point.
Thank you.
Dan Swartz?
I think our future agenda item we need to have is how much it's really costing to run the agency. Because I'm realizing how many dollars for admin are actually buried in the JPA wide bucket and not in your admin allocation. And so to Krista's point, the optics that are going to come out in a tax election is how much money is going into paying people on staff. And in all of our agencies, if we want to launch a new service internally, sometimes the answer is we have to stop doing something else internally. But it seems like the way we've been going with Zero Waste Marin is we just keep finding money for admin in other buckets. And I'm a little concerned that that we're going to get to the tax election and somebody's going to start doing the math and say that the real cost of running this agency is closer to 10% of the tax revenue. Because I think my instinct is I'm starting to just in my head add this up as it might actually be. And that's not how the measure read. So I think we need to perhaps have a discussion about everything that's going into the payment of people who are on the payroll or the operation of including the rent for this room and things like that. So we haven't had that discussion in a while, and then it's just hard to parse it out of all of this.
Happy to. Any other comments before we move on?
Yes, not related to the communications position, but more for the chipper day. Is there a percentage of days that didn't get used? I know it's at 1.4 million, which is it's a lot of money, but do we actually have days that did not get used? Or
we can pull that data for you, but I know the subscriptions were not maxed out subscriptions, but the subscriptions were very high percentage wise.
But we weren't at 100%.
No.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. We can always return to that topic later. I think for now, let's move on to the next items. So the next couple of items are grouped together because they're all related to data and modeling and our metrics and the CWPP. And Scott Farley's here to present these items. I want to provide a little context. The next item is related to data and modeling and the dashboards. So you all saw the dashboards that we have up and running right now. We're collecting data Green Info Network is helping get that data standardized and ready to use. And Scott Farley and his team go through and integrate that data into the models, which then get reflected into the dashboards, and then we can kind of calculate how much we're reducing risk. And then in addition to that, we can use that information and those updates to the landscape and the fuel models and our activities to update the CWPP on a regular basis. So as part of this proposal is a couple of things. One is during the CWPP update process, some topics came up from member agencies like, wouldn't it be great if we could add X, Y, and Z? And so developing that kind of wish list from member agencies to add to the CWPP, that's part of this proposal. Would we want to jump in 26, 27, add some of the things that the member agencies were suggesting, some of the ideas? So that's part of the proposal. And then separately, when we circulated the RFP, the vision was for the CWPP to be dynamic and updatable and reflect the most recent vegetation data and project data, et cetera. So then the option on the table is, do we want to update the CWPP to incorporate all of this data on an annual basis, every other year, et cetera? So that doesn't have to be decided today, but I think it's a good conversation, and Scott will talk about that. And then the Xyloplan urban conflagration modeling, that's an optional item. That could be a JPA-wide proposal if we wanted to accept that and add that to the budget, or that could be a zone-by-zone proposal that each zone could pay for on their own as their own proposal. So that's something to discuss. It's not included in the budget right now, but it's something that you could consider if you would like. Scott, you want to go ahead and share your screen and jump in?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Scott.
So hopefully y'all can see here. So that was a great overview. I'll keep it super brief, but happy to jump into questions if there's comments or questions about the status of the CWPP, but just starting with the data and modeling. So the CWPP, we are nearing completion. We have produced our draft deliverables that include the reports, the maps, some of the data. We are working towards the public story map. That is with the agencies to review at this point in time. And then we've got the public meeting coming up in May to share that with the public at large. So the goal of 26, 27 is going to be continue to produce the metrics that feed both the existing programs, the existing dashboards, and so forth, as well as to do a limited update of the CWPP. And the goal of that limited update would be that we have done so much work in this last year that we should take a breath, let that percolate into the development of effective programs, policies, and activities, and then to come back in 27, 28 and to do a full update. So what that looks like in terms of cost here. So for the core CWPP update, that is continuing to update the data sources that feed the CWPP. So this is updates to the fire resilient roads, as well as continued update to the dynamic risk scores, which are those parcel and discovery level scores coming out of the DSI program. Ongoing support for the CWPP web tool, which is the agency interface into the CWPP, which provides the rich sort of data support for why are these areas high risk? What can I determine about the profile of those areas? And how can I develop programs that would be effective for that sort of risk surface area? Continued coordination with the agencies. And then, as Anne mentioned, potentially integrating additional data sources that were not able to be incorporated in this year's CWPP, but could potentially be incorporated into next year's version of the CWPP, which include, as you can see here, the potentially additional communications assets,
data from CAD, such as ignition locations, or data from CAD that helps us understand better response timing. There's a couple others that you can see here that were requested by the agencies during the CWPP development process. We just want to make sure that those get integrated, since we have heard that those are important that they be part of the decision-making process. So about 81K for that. The next piece here is that we have regular updates to the board-approved metrics. So Willow is responsible for portions of Goal 5 and Goal 1. We already talked about the dashboards, but just being able to make sure that we continue updating those on a regular cadence so that we can track that progress over time. Just about 15K there. And then the vast remaining majority here is project and planning support. So once we have all this data, we have to figure out like, what do we do with it? And how do we help agencies make programs and policies that are really effective? And so I'll characterize this as like, use what you need. So I spend a lot of time meeting with staff, helping them understand how to use the data, what they need out of the data, coming up with impact assessments and so forth. And so this proposal allocates about 20 hours per JPA zone of that sort of one-on-one planning support, as well as additional support for the defensible space evaluation programs throughout the county. And then continued service of these like self-service planning dashboards that have been produced over the years to make some of that information self-service, and then the rest is sort of that one-on-one time to make this data really, really actionable. And then final piece here is to provide a data-focused presentation per JPA zone. This is something that we get asked a lot to, how are we doing? Where's our residual risk after we've implemented these programs? Like, where do we need to focus next, right? That sort of agency-facing presentation, so to staff and leadership, but very data-focused. And again, this would be a sort of use what you need, right? If you need it, we have it in the budget. If you don't need it, that money remains unspent here. So this is the data and metrics and CWPP proposal. There are, of course, like it's kind of intertwined, right? How we make sure that we update those metrics as well as update the CWPP. But hopefully this kind of gives a good breakdown of where those different tasks are, and how we can turn this data into something that's actionable and that tracks that progress over time while unifying it into the CWPP. So take a brief pause if there's any immediate questions, and then I'll put on my other hat and I'll provide the Xylo plan proposal. Everybody good? Cool. Actually, just one quick go back here. We'll be talking about the full update. Apologies for that. The full update, beginning in what is proposed as 27-28, is a much larger update that makes sure that the fuels data and the modeling remains kind of fully in sync as we continue to measure residual risk and as we continue to implement new programs. So you'll see the core CWPP update here is significantly larger, and that is a full refresh of the CWP's modeling, a full refresh of the prioritization that we do as part of the CWPP, the rest of the costs remaining the same there. And now I will provide the Xylo plan proposal here. I wear multiple hats. The other hat that I wear here is with Xylo plan. And so I believe this group saw the Xylo plan product in the December Ops Committee meeting. Just as a refresh here, right, we in partnership with the Moore Foundation and the Marin Community Foundation, had the opportunity to provide analysis for community conflagration assessment for 10 pilot communities. We've delivered 5 of those so far. We'll be delivering the remaining 5 over the next couple of weeks here. But this is looking at ignition probability, understanding the mechanisms of urban fire, how an urban fire would propagate, through a community, and then trying to come up with that prioritized list for mitigation that has the greatest community benefit, not just on a parcel by parcel basis. And this is something that sort of the overall suite of modeling that we have in the county kind of misses, right? It misses those ideas of chain reactions and the ability to have downstream implications of hardening and vegetation management upstream. So this proposal that I'll talk about here is really designed to fill that gap, to be able to describe how we're doing in terms of urban fire and how we can make plans that are really effective at reducing the risk of urban fire. The deliverable here for this will be a dynamic platform that updates annually as we have data from Fireside, as we have data from vegetation management projects that have been completed. We can see that change. We can see the residual risk. We can see the areas that we need to continue working on. We can see here, right, some ideas around return on investment. Are we making the most of that money that's going towards defensible space and home hardening, particularly through ideas like the grants program, or could we be more effective? Access to the platform, GIS files so that it integrates specifically with agency planning processes. Continued presentations to make sure that this data gets out there and is actionable and understood. Annual model updates, moving into an annual update cadence where we'll describe that return on investment, residual risk, and that prioritized risk reduction plan. We'll leave two options here for what this could look like in terms of budget. Option A there is the full county, so sort of as a JPA project. This will be slightly cheaper because there's sort of less administrative costs of kind of going back and forth. But it's also, we're totally happy to do option B, which would be a la carte by zone. So if individual zones were interested in this, we can do just that zone, right? And the last thing that I'll say here before I wrap up is this would be only new work. So that work that was funded by the Moore Foundation and Marin Community Foundation would be subtracted from that overall total cost. So this would be the cost for, excuse me, the cost for new work in areas that we haven't yet modeled. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Scott. We can take a moment and answer questions about these two items.
The allotted presentations for Xylo Plan, are those actual, are they presentations or are they actually modelings?
They would be presentations on the modeling. So we find that like just providing the modeling in a written document or a story map or something like that doesn't fully capture, right? It's still maybe hard to understand. So we often get asked to provide presentations on the modeling that was completed. And that's what we've budgeted there for.
Thank you.
And I'll also note that Todd Lando, who's the chair of the ATC working group, is also here and available to express thoughts on all of these proposals. And wanted to invite Todd, do you want to say anything about these items? There was a lot of discussion at the ATC.
Yeah, I have a whole report from the ATC that I think will cover all of it if we can get to that as the agenda item after the presentations are done.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question for you regarding the last item. Is there a timeline for that? Would you guys be able to be providing that information come July 1st, or will there be a lag time before member agencies could utilize that?
That's a good question. I think we'd have to kind of think through whether it was that zone by zone option or the full county. But I can certainly get back with you and provide an estimate there. I don't have that off the top of my head, but if that's important, we can definitely take that under consideration.
I mean, the assumption is it'll be ready for the full county if we go that route at some point during the fiscal year, correct?
During next fiscal year, yes, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just maybe not by July 1st.
Got it. Thank you.
Mark, Marianne, I'm having a hard time digesting all this because I'm not a firefighter, fire chief. This is one I think I really am going to need a written report from the ATC explaining to me what the bang for the buck and ROI is of all these options that are laid out here. You know, I'm always pro data, but it's a lot of money. I also think when this comes for a real decision, it'd be helpful to see not just the initial proposal, but what we're committing to for 8 years, 10 years out if we go with this, because it strikes me as the kind of product that once you buy in, you're kind of committing to it for a fairly long term. And I don't know if there's choices to make to manage those costs as we go through that time period. And then I'd also appreciate when you bring it back, it seems a little rigid to me to try to divvy all this up equally by zones. I mean, I think this is one where I defer to the professionals that maybe countywide and maybe strategically allocating their research at different points is appropriate. So I'd like to hear more about that when it comes back.
Thank you.
Mark, also, I think there was a pretty long discussion at the ATC meeting regarding the ongoing annual updates for the CWPP.
Yeah,
One
that's
of
what
the
we were
biggest,
asking Todd to mention.
yeah, one of the biggest concerns we had was the actual cost of the annual updates. Even though we see this as a snapshot of what's going on within the county of when the data is collected, and we're trying to get to a dynamic system so we, as fire managers, can make adequate decisions for fuels mitigation, fuels management, and emergency planning. However, I think if you're doing a CWPP annually, I don't think you're getting quite as a return on investment, especially for the price tag that's being offered. You know, at 300,000 annually, and if you're looking at a 3-year contract plus the initial one,
The update's 220, not 300. The 300 number includes all the other work that Willow does that we would
Correct.
need to do without the updated CWPP. So the updated CWPP would be 221.
okay. So, so for 221, even though you look at a 3-year contract, are we truly getting a true return on that investment for the data that's in there for the work that we need to do on the field?
Yeah, absolutely. We want to lean on you guys
Yeah.
to help make that decision. When the working group was going through this, we explored quarterly updates, biannual updates, twice a year or every 2-year updates, and we landed on with the working group landed on annual, not knowing what that price tag was going
Right.
to be. And you know, if the operations committee thinks every 2 years is good, then every 2 years is good. It's
Because
what
one of the
desire-
biggest things is, does our landscape or our knowledge of the landscape area and the topography really change dramatically annually to where we need to update it? You know, is it, like you said, is it biannual or maybe even triannual, where you start looking at similar to our code cycles?
When it comes to the vegetation the vegetation management that's happening, we're updating that quarterly.
Okay. I just think there needs to be more discussion before we invest into a 3-year contract that could probably extend us out close to about $1 million of core funding.
Totally agree.
Okay, thank you.
And does the 221 take us through to 2930? Was that, or just?
Annual.
Oh,
It'd be
annual.
annual.
And
Total
then,
chunk.
Mark, if we could just be clear how this affects the overall budget. I mean, it's not budgeted in at all in this draft JPA wide spreadsheet. So whatever this is going to add to the
In
5.797
future
million.
years, not this year. The 5.7 would include the 81 that's included for this year's update.
Okay.
It's the Xylo plan that's not included in this year's.
Right. But would that be happening this
It's up
year?
to you guys.
Okay. So I guess back to my point, though, that would add to this 5.79.
The Xylo plan, yes. I was locked on the CWP. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's right. Sorry. Yeah, just so at the two, I'd push it a little over 6 million, which then would reduce individual core zone budgets
correct
accordingly.
The Xylo plan was the 10 communities that we've had they've been well received. So we just wanted to give you, the operations committee, an option. Is this something you want to see across the entire jurisdiction, or are you happy with the 10 communities that we've received?
Okay, thank you.
Then we did ask Scott to come up with numbers for, what would the cost be if we updated the CWPP every other year instead of every year, things like that. So that's something that we can discuss, and we don't have to decide that at this moment, but it's just good information for the discussion. Anything else on this?
Just to be clear, I'm going to address it from the ATC's perspective when we get to that agenda item.
Great. Thank you, Todd. Okay. Well, in the interest of time, to make sure we have time for you to get to the ATC update, let's go ahead and move on to the next items on the list. We're making pretty good time. So next, I want to address the environmental compliance budget. This is higher this year than the previous couple of years because we've been able to use rollover year to year, and we've used up that rollover. So now it's time to kind of replenish the pot of funds for environmental compliance. So as you may recall, we have about 45 approved projects, vegetation management projects that have gone through CEQA already, but are being implemented on the landscape. And these range from smaller projects that are categorically exempt under CEQA to larger projects that are PSAs, project-specific analysis documents under the CalVTP. So they range greatly in size. We do a lot of work behind the scenes through this budget to support these projects and the program in general. We've been able to develop a program that has created a lot of trust with the environmental community because we're continuing to do all the things that we're required to do with different stakeholders, with the tribe, with the Coastal Commission, with regulatory agencies, et cetera. So we want to maintain that high standard for our work. So this budget replenishes that kind of bucket of funds that we pull from. So each of the zones can pull from this bucket currently through our current contractor, Panorama Environmental, and all of their sub-consultants, the geologists, cultural resources, biologists, et cetera. We pull from that budget to support all of these projects and make sure that the botanical surveys, the bird surveys, cultural resources, the geologists, et cetera, go out in the field and support these projects. We also do a lot of data collection and additional GIS support in addition to Green Info Network, the right to enter agreements, responses to letters from the public, from various interest groups, environmental stakeholders asking about the work that we do, meeting facilitation, meeting and field trips with regulatory agencies, public meetings, permits, Caltrans, et cetera. So there's a lot that goes into this budget that isn't always visible. So this proposal supports existing exempt core projects. The large projects that went through a different environmental compliance process called the CalVTP pull their environmental compliance from their project budgets. What I'd like to continue doing for the smaller projects is you do all the environmental compliance surveys, meeting stuff, but you're not pulling from the same budget that you're paying your crews out of, because I want that those dollars to be available for crew work without needing to adjust because we had to do a bird survey, and so you have to subtract that amount from your budget. So the idea is to maintain that high level of environmental compliance for all of our core exempt projects that are out there on the landscape, and keep rewarding member agencies for pulling from that bucket to do all of this work. So the dollar amount is $530. Whereas in previous years, we've been able to kind of lowball that number because we've been drawing from a rollover year to year, but we've depleted that. So that's that item. Happy to take questions if needed. Go ahead.
So I think I hear you saying you use this account to bill staff time too. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, it's consultant time. Primarily, it's our work with Panorama and the different consultants who are providing support in all of these different ways.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So speaking of which, We do have staff time. So we have 2 vegetation management specialists who are paid. Go ahead, sorry.
On the panorama,
Yeah.
is there anybody auditing that? Because they're also the ones that are generating the fact that we need panorama to hire them, right?
Well, the regulations are generating the need to have an
But
environmental.
they're the ones that audit and evaluate the evaluations, and based on that, we hire them.
Right.
Is that correct?
We had an RFP and hired them to do the work. And all of the very detailed invoices are available in a shared drive for all member agency staff. So all staff are able to go through and audit every dollar that's
But we
through
don't,
them.
but there's no internal audit that we do. Like, I know we have access to that. PRAs have access to that, but do we have an internal mechanism to ensure that is being, that what they're recommending as far as environmental type of stuff, because we're essentially hiring them to tell us what we need as far as environmental reporting, but we also hire them to be part of that process.
Right. And that's why you hired me, the planning and program manager, because I've been doing environmental compliance for
Okay.
23
Perfect.
years.
So do you audit that to ensure that that is correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then is that a report out that you can give us on the auditing that you do internally?
Well, each month when I go through their invoices, I look at all of the dollars spent and how they're spent. I also meet very regularly with our CEQA attorney to determine what is necessary and what is not. And so we actually meet weekly to discuss steps forward and what's necessary.
Okay.
And then we've been doing that from the get-go
And it
to
just,
make sure we're not doing more than what's necessary, because we are trying to ride that line of we go above and beyond to a certain extent, but not to the point where we are wasting public dollars. The idea is that if we do all of this work, it makes us more efficient in the long run because it avoids litigation and Public Records Act requests and things like that.
and then I guess I'm still having a little trouble associating what the additional costs are. I mean, that's double of what we paid before.
Well, it's not double what we paid, it's double what we budgeted for in the work plan. So we're spending about $300,000 to $400,000 a year for all of this work on a regular basis. It's just that we've been able to pull from past budgets.
Okay. Thank you.
So for example, coordinating projects, we'll be working with Panorama and Far Western, who does cultural resources surveys, Sequoia, who does botanical surveys, Caltrans and the county, Public Works, maybe Bolinas PUD, and others to coordinate what happens when and what the different kind of allowable windows of time are. So for example, we want to do some work in Bolinas, but we're tracking the monarch overwintering season because we're not allowed to start until, a certain date because of that. And then we have the nesting season for birds and bats. And so we're required to do a significant amount of work to avoid those resources. We're also required to do a significant amount of work to make sure that whatever we're doing on slopes does not cause any instability. And then we need right to enter and we need, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of work that happens on the back end that isn't always visible.
Okay. And is Panorama, do we have like a set contract of the deliverables, or is it hourly? How do they bill us?
Yeah, we have a contract with them, and so each year we update the task orders underneath that contract for this general environmental compliance budget, and then also for each of the large projects. So, and each member agency with one of those large projects goes through and approves those before I sign off on those. So what we do is we try to predict how many, given this budget, how many bird surveys does this cover? How many geological site visits does this cover? So we try to itemize it all out and we count as each one of those things, how many hours of meeting facilitation, work with regulatory agencies, et cetera. We're counting down. And then when something gets low, then we have a new task order and with the updated needs and what we're predicting that we need for. So it's all very itemized. And I'm happy to share any of that with you if you'd like.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Anything else on that? And if anybody would like to dig into this further, I'm happy to jump in and hop on a Zoom with you and dive into the details. Each invoice that I get from Panorama includes all the subcontractors, and each invoice is about 40 pages long. So we've got all the detail, all the gory detail if you'd like it. Okay, so speaking of vegetation management, we have 2 vegetation management specialists that are covered under this budget item. And these folks help manage the data collection and monitoring and GIS activities, the contracting, including the under the master services agreements, making sure we have task orders in place so we get crews on the ground, right to enter work, a lot of project planning and environmental compliance, permitting, such as working with Caltrans, walking the project site with the county, with Caltrans, et cetera, coordinating crews, coordinating biologists and other folks out in the field to do surveys, knocking on doors, doing right to enter agreements, public communication, talking to Firewise, communities, et cetera. And so this budget item is just slightly higher than last year because of 3% increase. I also want to note in the packet, the 2 numbers from last year and this year are reversed. So just note that the correct number is 250,000. And then I also want to invite coastal member agencies to jump in at any point. I want to note we have an item in this work plan, just like last year, to help support work in West Marin. As you know, West Marin generates less revenue than other zones, but also has a much, much higher regulatory burden. So from a regulatory standpoint, it's expensive to do work in West Marin. We're navigating compliance with the Coastal Commission. We have been from the get-go. It takes many years to get any kind of permitting in place. We happen to have the governor's emergency proclamation in place now, which is allowing us to work on the coastal fuel reduction network, which is pictured here. So those little red areas are spots that have been identified by the coastal member agencies to do fuel reduction work. We have 2 years of approval from the state to do this work. We went through extensive environmental compliance to get that exemption. And so last year we funded this work to the tune of 200,000, and we took 300,000 from the reserve fund because we determined that our reserve fund was actually quite high and can probably be reduced. So in fact, somebody in this room came up with that idea last year, I recall. And so we're proposing to do the same thing this year since we do have a little bit more time left where we have permission to move forward on this work. We were able to spend those dollars in West Marin this year, so that's exciting given the regulatory approvals, those small windows of time where you don't have northern spotted owl or bats or birds or other resources. Then we were able to do the work in West Marin, and veg management specialists were able to support it in the field. So the proposal this year is a repeat of last year to continue with that emergency exemption work. We also have other work in the coastal zone that could potentially benefit from this fund if desired, but generally the focus is on the work that has temporary approval from the state. I want to ask, is anybody from a coastal agency, would anybody like to add to what I mentioned? Chief Perry, Gove?
Yeah, Jesse Perry out here from Stinson Beach. It's been this last year has opened up our ability to do projects astronomically with the reduction in environmental compliance. And so we've gotten some great work done, and we hope to continue the work up next year. Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, George, just mimicking both what Ann and Jesse said, we've finally kind of been able to break into doing some work out here, and this would help us strike while the iron's hot with that order. So that's, I think to Anne's point, but she stated it pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to say anything here? David Briggs or anybody else? I don't mean to call you out, but just giving you the opportunity.
Yeah, ditto on George and Jesse's statements. Yeah, we're just finally able to do some work last year, and we only got through a very small portion of it with the funds that were set aside. And yeah, we still have a lot to do this year, and the money, this money would just allow us to continue that work. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So I think I'll leave it there for now and make sure we get to the Fire Foundry item. Chief Marcucci, if you're able to speak to this, I have a summary slide here with just a few bullet points. Are you able to speak?
I am, Ann. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning for a few more minutes. Good morning, committee members. My apologies for not being in person. Just wanted to speak a little bit on this Fire Foundry project, JPA-wide project for about $256,000. That'll allow for about 56 days of work to be performed across the county in each of the zones that you see on the slide there. The Fire Foundry is going through a realignment, if you will, with Marin County Fire Department. What used to be a little smaller cohort is growing to now include 17 employees on a daily basis, a captain, an engineer, a seasonal firefighter, an experienced seasonal firefighter, and then 14 fellows that are in the program themselves that'll be forming a new and improved fuels crew, if you will, in addition to the TAM fire crew. So this will be Marin County Fire Department's 5th crew to be able to get out into the community that they are from to do a lot of this good work. What you do see on that slide is that our normal cost is $7,000 per day. That includes all equipment, vehicles, personnel, etc. But we're able to drop that down to $4,500 in this project here, where basically the foundry will be giving a week of work, give or take a few days, based on the different zones providing the funding on this JPA project. And we really do believe that it'll provide not only a benefit to the foundry, but a huge benefit to the county in the different zones. Because of the sake of time, I'll hold it there. Hopefully you've reviewed the project. I'm happy to take any questions or expand if need be.
Thank you so much. And I know we do want to get to Todd providing an update from the ATC, so I'm not sure if we want to jump in and have him provide that update as part of this item so that we can continue with discussion.
First item on my list.
And I'm happy to defer to Todd, and if there's no other questions at this point, and I'll be on for any other questions.
Thank you so much. Todd, if it's okay with the rest of the group, let's go ahead and maybe fit your update in this item so we can all react to it.
You prepared for me to give the full update from the ATC? Is that what you're proposing?
Sure, go ahead.
It's going to take me about 5 minutes to get through it.
I think that's great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Todd Lando, the current chairperson of the ATC committee. I was going to say good morning, but I don't know if it's morning anymore. To brief update, our last meeting was on March 5th, the ATC. First, we were presented, and we appreciate that strategic guidance from the Ops Committee. We discussed the updated guidance specifically regarding the ignition reduction item that Ann mentioned earlier. We're going to take that into account when we review technical aspects of work plan proposals and projects going forward. So thank you. The ATC, our discussion focused on several, but not all of the proposals that you guys have seen today. We didn't have time to get through it, so we have scheduled an additional meeting. It's going to be essentially a half-day meeting for us so that we can have a really robust discussion. And the ATC has really started to take this task to heart. And I think we're working finally in the way that the ATC committee was envisioned by the MWPA from the beginning. We did discuss the JPA-wide fuels crew, the Fire Foundry crew that Chief Marcucci just mentioned, the CWPP risk modeling update cadence. communications coordination across the agencies, what Gene presented in the scope of Fire Safe Marin. It was a really good, thoughtful discussion among, these are the practitioners that are doing the stuff on the ground. So first, that Fire Foundry fuels crew proposal that Chief Marcucci just mentioned, the ATC committee expressed strong, unanimous support for this proposal. From the ATC's perspective, this is exactly the type of program that aligns perfectly with the intent of Measure C, supports fuels reductions, evacuation route clearances, gives us really flexible implementation capacity across all the jurisdictions. These are the kind of things we love to discuss. Programs that put fuels crews on the ground, fuel reduction, evacuation capacity. These are the things that really give us clear, measurable risk reduction. Broad, again, unanimous, we pulled the group agreement that this proposal deserves your strongest consideration. We spent quite a bit of time discussing the CWPP updates, especially the proposals to update the risk modeling on an annual basis and the expanded Xylo plan coverage that Scott discussed with you. The consensus at the ATC was that the CWPP modeling and risk assessments are valuable. They're state of the art. They're worthwhile addition to our toolboxes, but annual updates add significant cost without providing us the operational value that justifies that expense. Now that we know the expense, the current CWP data update cadence is roughly 5 years. That's when CWPPs are updated. And we agreed when this CWPP was proposed, the update was proposed, that we needed a better, more frequent interval than every 5 years. 5 years is not ideal, but moving all the way to annual updates, especially when we consider what we now know as the projected cost, we don't think it necessarily translates into better decision making on the ground. So most of the work we're doing, fuels projects, defensible space programs, home hardening initiatives, we're operating on multi-year timelines. And so while that updated frequent modeling is valuable in one sense, the committee really seems to feel that the optimal cadence falls somewhere between the current 5 year cycle and annual updates. So committing to the yearly contractor updates, we think is just going to give us diminishing returns relative to the cost. So the ATC will continue to discuss this. We don't think that discussion is complete yet. We don't have all the information, but our initial reaction is that it needs to be, we need to reconsider the annual updates, and again, largely related to the cost. We heard the presentation from Jean Bonander. I think what we heard was a little more in depth. She had a bit more time with the ATC committee that summarized those listening sessions that she conducted with Pam Kuhn. The committee spent quite a bit of time discussing the themes that came out of those conversations. Our discussions touched on issues like the differences in how agencies approach wildfire messaging, questions about the branding and consistency across jurisdictions, whether the MWPA might benefit from that additional communications coordination position. I want to say that I also participated in one of the interviews with Gene and Pam, and I want to acknowledge how much work that took on their part. They clearly surfaced a whole range of perspectives across the county, and I think that was helpful to the ATC. That said, I don't think many of the points that I raised personally during the interviews were fully reflected in the summary that I saw presented to the ATC. And I'm not suggesting that it was intentional. I think the conversations covered a lot of ground, so summarizing was difficult. But that topic is really important. We discussed it at length at the ATC. And so I want to take a minute to just clarify the perspective that we discussed and that I discussed here. So, we've wrestled in Marin for a long time with the tendency for agencies to emphasize their own programs, their own branding, their own messaging, and I think we understand that instinct. Local agencies are proud of their work, their communities, they want to recognize it. But wildfire clearly doesn't respect jurisdictional boundaries. We repeat that ad nauseum. That's really exactly why the MWPA was created as a JPA. The purpose of that JPA is for us to operate as a regional system, not as a funding source for jurisdictions to each move in their own direction. So one of the most powerful things I think we can do in wildfire preparedness through the MWPA is to present that single authoritative voice to the public. When residents hear that consistent messaging across all the jurisdictions about defensible space and home hardening, evacuation planning, it really builds the trust. It increases that likelihood that people will take action, which is what we're trying to measure. When we start layering in all the different branding, different messaging, and different interpretations of the same programs, we're making it harder for residents to understand what we're asking them to do. So consistency is our most powerful tool in communication. Well, I'll speak from the central zone. We've worked really hard. We're the most fragmented zone in that we have multiple agencies and jurisdictions all working towards the same goal. But we've worked really hard over the past several years and really long before MWPA started to move in that opposite direction. Central Marin Fire, Ross Valley Fire, Kentfield Fire, we've all really deliberately aligned our defensible space programs, our messaging, our outreach strategies, so that residents across the communities are hearing the exact same information and participating in the exact same programs the same way. That approach we think has been successful. We think that that's that was the model that MWPA intended. It strengthened our relationships between all these little individual agencies. It's created efficiencies for us, reinforced the idea that we're working together to solve a regional problem, not a local problem. We know that recently there have been some conversations among agencies about maximizing the share of funding that flows into individual jurisdictions and zones. And sometimes it's framed around like which communities receive or contribute the largest portion of Measure C revenues. So I want to caution against that line of thinking, and I'm going to, counter by really emphasizing this with the ATC as we move forward. That approach is counter to what Measure C established, the zones and the formulas for distribution of the core funds rather than simple agency allocations. This whole project was created to approach this as a regional challenge, not compete among jurisdictions. So just to in this recognition of the time here, I want to wrap up with my observation on the communications position and reflect on the ATC's discussion, which is ongoing on this topic. We'll discuss it in greater depth and come forward with the recommendation to the Ops Committee after our upcoming meeting. But public education really needs to be viewed as infrastructure for all of us. It's one of the main pillars in MWPA's overall organizational strategy. It's the only pillar that intersects with every program and initiative. MWPA staff is clearly making a sincere effort to address concerns raised by some members of the MWPA board, the Ops Committee, and others. The estimated full cost of that communications position is roughly $200,000 annually when all the employment costs are considered. And this is about 1.75 times the cost of a comparable position at our nonprofit partner, FireSafe Marin. The claim that there's no additional cost to the MWPA that Gene repeated, that doesn't really fully capture the reality of the proposal or the downstream effects on our current communication structure. So we need to discuss that in greater detail. So before creating the new position, I think we really need to fully answer the question, what specific problem are we trying to solve that our current structure can't already address? This question is worthy of ongoing discussion. If the issue is coordination or messaging consistency, clear deliverables, those things can all be addressed through the FireSafe Marin scope of work that's currently being developed. That scope recognizes in its recitals that FireSafe Marin takes a holistic approach to communications and education. and it has consistently over delivered on all of this since MWPA's inception. So before we create a parallel structure, I asked for the ATC and the Ops Committee that we clearly define the problem that we're trying to solve. We develop a clear strategy that shows how a new position will improve our outcomes. So strengthening the system that we already have, I think, is the most efficient path forward, and we'll discuss that further and report back to you at the next meeting. So ultimately, I'll just repeat that we at the ATC committee believe that the purpose of the MWPA is to bring all these agencies together so we can address the risk as a county-wide problem. And the more we operate as a unified system with shared messaging, shared priorities, and that regional perspective, the more effective we'll be. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Todd. Really appreciate it. So I want to note we have an ad hoc subcommittee that's going to be meeting very soon, I think next week, to dive into the nitty-gritty details of all these proposals. We also have another meeting next month where we're going to talk about zone-specific proposals, but a lot of those honestly are repeat from previous years, so there will be plenty of time, I think, to revisit a lot of these topics. The ATC is going to continue discussing all of these topics as well. We have another ATC meeting coming up. I think we're squeezing another one in the next couple of weeks to discuss all of this further. I also want to invite you all, because I know we're short on time now and over. If there are particular talking points you'd like to share that you didn't get to share today, I mean, we can continue this meeting longer if that's what you prefer, but you can also just email me and make sure that I have your concerns, and then we can bring those up in the Ops ad hoc subcommittee and make sure that those thoughts and concerns and ideas are reflected during that conversation as well. So I just want to put that invitation out there. But that's all of the proposals that we have received, and many are repeats from previous years, but some are new. Happy to discuss further if that's what the committee would like, or we can call it a day with a lot of information.
Okay, I'll do a little housekeeping right here. So I'm going to go ahead and open it up for committee questions for items 7B and 8A. Any questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and open it up to public comment.
And we have Heather Abrams with her hand up online.
Hi, sorry, just a quick question. Did the ATC discuss the grant program, and is there a need for more funding there? I'm just not close enough. I have no public feedback about whether there's a demand for more funding there.
We discussed it only at the highest level, and it'll be on the list of discussion items at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll open it up to public comment for anybody in the room or online for items 7A and 8A. I'm sorry, 7B and 8A.
And so there are no hands at this time.
Okay, no hands at this time. Seeing no comment, bring it back for any discussion on 7B and 8A. Seeing no discussion items, we will move on to item 10, committee members' requests regarding future agenda items. Does anybody have any requests to staff for future agenda items? Seeing none, adjourn the meeting here at 12:12. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.